In the last video we set up the media creator and the article setup, and in this video we're going to be setting up the package system so that we can create our own package along with installing MariUI and doing some modifications to the navbar. So that's the primary things we're going to be working on throughout this video. So grab your favorite coding beverage and let's jump into the video. Alright, so in the first part of this series with this, we want to actually completely redo the navigation bar, and that leads me to the second thing in this course. We are going to set up MariUI. So to get started with, let's go ahead and compose and require this. Now we will install MariUI. We don't need to set up any sort of authentication pages, anything like that, but after this is installed, we just need to run this command here. We don't need Vault, but if you want to use that, that's fine. And we're going to use npm for this. And then after this, let's go ahead and publish the config file. So it should just be mari.php. And in here you can see we have the search feature if you want to add that, spotlight here. And we have a prefix for the Mari application part here as well, so we can use any component with the prefix Mari dash. Alright, so with that sorted, what it basically goes and does now is that we can use any of these input fields here. But for this part actually, because MariUI is based on Daisy UI, I'm going to go into Daisy UI's website because we can easily just go ahead and copy a navigation bar from here, which is basically just using Daisy UI's navigation system. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and actually I'm going to go and select this one for now. So if we go in here, we should now be able to go back here, and you can see this is our navigation bar. We have the pages here, we have the title here, and we have the notification icon and the search icon here. And for that part now, that's sorted. We can also go in here, you can see we have all the different forms. We have menus, dialogues, and so on that we can add in here. For now, I'm going to leave this bit out here, and what I want to go ahead and do is use the Mari icon for this part here. And then we can go into Blade UI Kit search form, and we can go into Hero Icons, and we can go for actually we can just select this one here. So what we just go ahead and do here is just copy this bit in, and I think we use dots here instead of dashes. And there you go. So now we're using a Mari icon instead, which looks a bit better. For this one, I'm going to go ahead and say config, and then I'm going to say app, and we will in this case go in here to the environment folder, and we're selecting the name. So if you go into the config folder, just going to close this off here, you can see that we have app and we have name. So that pulls up the app name here. Now, one thing I just want to point out here, which is probably quite good to know, is highly recommended to use config folders and never take anything directly with the env variable, because that may cause issues with cache. So I would always recommend that you use the config file and never use env, even though that may look tidier by not having to do anything but just get the variable and not have to create a config folder file. But I would recommend you do it this way. So you can see we now have this name here, which is based upon down here, and obviously later on we want to add settings into the app so that we can get this ourselves, but for now I'm just going to call this wire content. Then we want to have the search icon. And I think we can find this icon down here, so one of these icons would work here, so we could just use magnifying glass. So I'm gonna go ahead and require this one instead, and that would be for the first button here, I think. So if we go in here now, we just say xMary icon name, and you see we have this one here, and just to double check that this is the right one, you can see we added some text here, so we are editing the correct icon here. And then this is the notification icon. So what we want to go ahead and here and do is we can actually, in this case, just select the bell here, but we're going to use the blade icon, hero icons here. So let's find a bell. I'm going to go for this one here. And there we go. So now we have the icons changed around, so this will make the file look a bit tidier, along with a navigation bar. This is just our standard one we're going to be using for now. Later on we're going to actually start adding in some pages and work more around the navigation bar. I just thought we should change it over to the new one now. So the other thing we want to go ahead and do in this application is we're going to create our own package. So to set this up to begin with, let's get started with the Navbar Package skeleton, which is what I prefer to use. So what you can do is, if you're logged into GitHub, you should just be able to go in here and use this as a template, create a new repository, and I'm going to call this wire content. You don't need to add any description in. You create this repository, just takes a second. And then all you have to do is just get the SSH key, SSH URL, and then go into CD. Just going on, close this about here. So I want to move this packages folder actually out to the main folder here. So if we refactor that there, CD packages, and then git clone. And then what we should have in here is a package folder. And if we close ahead some of these things here, you can see that we now have wire content, and in here we need to modify a few things. So I'm gonna call this, in this case, wire content service provider. So in here what we do is we have the name here. I'm gonna call this wire content again. We have a config file which we can use later on. So I'm gonna call this wire config again. And we also have a migration file where we will add in the individual migration files that we're gonna add in later on. And we may also set up an installation command later down the line. So I'm gonna call this the install command. And there we go. So I've just updated it up here as well. And then on top of that, what else we want in here is, I'm just going to call this wire content. And then in here, we want to have a few different folders. So we want to have a modals folder. We want to have as well components. So this may be Filament components or any components with Livewire that we will be adding. We also want the ability to have, in this case, a traits folder. So if we have any traits for models, and I think we will leave it at this for now. Inside the composer.json file, I'm gonna just go ahead and change this bit here. And also content management system for the description for now. And you may also go ahead and add some tags in here. You can also add the auto description in here if you want to. I'm gonna add in the version as well. For now, we will be just having version 0.01. We will add in the GitHub homepage as well. And we will also be messing around a bit with this file here. So one of the steps we want to do in this video is basically to, even though we won't necessarily have anything in the package yet, be able to compose the required inside our primary composer file for the project, so that we can easily just go ahead and require this. So let's go ahead and see how we can actually require this. It requires a fair few changes around in different places, so let's take a look at that now. Alright, so let's go ahead and modify our composer.json file, which will be inside our packages folder and then the composer.json file in here. So to get started with, I'm gonna actually go ahead and fill out the author section for now. I'm gonna just close down these here so we have a bit more space. And I'm gonna add in the email here as well. And for this package, we then want to add in a few different things. So inside the extra part here, we want to specify specifically what the provider should be. So I'm going to go ahead in here and I'm going to say wire, and in this case content. We want to go into wire, in this case content service provider. And for the alias skeleton, we want to call this wire content. And in here, I want to do wire content again, and I want to do facades, and I want to do wire content. So this also requires us to go ahead and have some other changes. So for this, I want to go into our wire provider here and change our namespace. So I'm just going to call this wire content. And then inside the service here, inside this one, we want to call this wire content. And for the facades, we want to go in and refactor this because we call this something else in the file. So if we go into the composer.json, we call this wire content again. and then inside the facade we want to go ahead and basically return wire content service provider, which we're importing up here. And that basically allows us then to have the facade here. We just want to call this wire content facade, like that. And then here we want to just call this wire content commands. And then inside, again, the composer.json, we also have the ability to require what is required for these packages, such as if you wanted to have a different package required that you want to include in your project, you can require it in here. So then inside our composer.json file, in our primary file here, so this would be this one down here, we basically want to create a repositories. Just like this. And we want this to be an array. And inside this array, we want to have an object where we will have the type. And in this case, we just want this to be path. We want a URL. And it's going to be packages, wire content. And we also want in here options and symlink sent to true. So hopefully if we set everything up right now, we should just be able to go into our root folder here and do composer update. And let's see if it fails or if it succeeds. So let's see what's going on here. So we should, if it succeeded, be able to see inside our vendor folder here and go and search for Matilde I'm, and it does not look like it has worked. So let's go ahead and check in here. So we have packages / wire content. And oh yeah, we also want to add it up here, obviously, in our require function here. So I'm just going to add in this as wire content here. Composer update, see if this works. And it seems like it's installing it so far, but we have an issue with wire content service provider not being found. So let's go ahead and see what's going on here. So one of the issues here I can already see is that we just want to call this wire content. And then inside commands, install command. Just like that. And then also inside composer.json, let's just take a look down here. So we have wire content service provider, just copy the name here. And we want to get that from the wire content namespace. And let's see as well, in here we also want to make sure that inside our wire content service provider that we have everything set up properly. Just going to close down some of these here. So if we try again, see if this worked when we fixed the command thing. Okay, so still not finding wire content / wire content service provider. And then in autoload here, I think we don't need autoload def for now, so I'm gonna go ahead and delete that. And the only thing we want to have in here is essentially saying we want to have wire content, and then we just want to go to the source folder there. And we want to remove the comma there as well. So let's see if this works. Okay, so outside of that, I think also another thing that's really helpful to have set up is, alright, basically so far I managed to figure out the issue was that I had to basically so far delete the link here and this bit here, and then compose update and clear cache and that, and now we're just getting an issue with the config file, which we should be able to fix. So if we head back into our package folder, we got this wire config folder file here. I'm just gonna remove this bit here up. Composer.json, and I'm sorry, inside our wire service provider. And we want to make sure we have config file, which is perfect. We also in here want to return, in this case we just want to have a protected static function get facade accessor and return string. We want to just return in here wire content. And then in here we have this facade access as well. And on top of that, we also want to head into our wire common service provider. And I think for now, the other thing we want to make sure of in here is inside our config folder here. We have that set up. Let's try to compose update again. And the config file is not inside the source folder, so that's where that issue is occurring. So for this one, I think we can just head into, let's try to head into our package here. And for now, just exclude the config file and see if that works. There we go. So what we should be able to see now, and we can always add the config file when we actually have configuration to do, we should be able to see everything in here, which is perfect. So now we're able to actually see the package in our vendor file as well, and we will be able to add things into this area here. So for example, one thing I may want to do, at the moment I'm gonna start moving the article model, and I'll move that into the models folder here. I'll keep them in both places for now, and we can later on actually start working on it, but just to give you an example of what we may want to do. And then we would instead obviously have this as namespace wire content models. And then in here we would also want to have a public function to the user model. So we want to have this to be belongs to, and we also want to add that to the other, to our regular model, but we will leave this for now in here. And the way we can do this, because we're basically accessing a user model which is not in the package, it's outside of the package. So the way I like to do this, and there exists other app options as well, is just to go through the config, and then here I just want to say auth providers, users, and model, just like that. And we should then be able to basically get the user model returned in here. So that's how simple that is. We also later on want to make sure we basically move our Filament resources into there, but we will leave that for now. And again, I want to keep this package development quite simple at first, and I don't want to essentially start just moving everything away, because I find it easier myself, at least, to develop the full resource first and then move it into a package. Develop the full code inside the application first and then move it into a package. And then after that, I start debugging all the issues with that. That's the approach I will take throughout this course, but if you prefer another approach, please let me know in the comments below. And lastly, what we also want to get ahead and do in this video is inside our resources folder here, inside Livewire, we also want to make PHP Artisan Livewire component. We just want to call this Livewire make. We want to have a components folder, and we want to call this Navbar. And then we want to go into navigation, like this. Copy all of this in. I'm going to go ahead and delete this here. In here we can then add in the navbar. And then inside our layouts file, we can remove the styles, because Livewire 3 injects that automatically, so no reason to keep that there. And I just want to go ahead here and say Livewire components.navbar. And then if we head back in here now, you can see our application still works the same. There's no changes basically. So now we're actually able to have our own navbar here using Daisy UI / Mary UI. We're also able to now start working within our package system, which will basically allow us to go a bit more advanced. So the only other thing I want to do, because in the next video we're going to start working on displaying article cards and the article page, but I also want to go ahead and make sure we can have comments set up. So I created a package here which is called wire comments. So if we go back in here to my repositories, you can see we can set this up here. So I'm going to go ahead in here and require the package. Let's see if this works fine. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and publish the provider and the migration. And on top of that, we just want to double check that we can actually migrate things here. That works fine. So we're adding guest ID to reactions to comments table. We're creating comments and reactions table. And inside our article model, so for this one, I'm just going to go ahead and say use commentable. And again, we can add this into our wire content package and actually require this in here later on, so that it will come with the box, but it will be maintained separately in its own place. And then on top of that, what we also want to do later on is we want to include this in the view. And quite importantly, I also want to add in the Livewire script config to the app.blade.php file, which I'm going to do down here. And outside of that, we can later on also start looking at creating our own directive here, or just use the existing one inside the package. For now, I'm going to just use the existing one which we have in the package. So I just want to go into app.js, which you will find if you go into resources.js, app.js, just like that. And that will then allow us to create human readable dates. We can create our own one in here. We need to install Day.js though, however, for this to work. And outside of that, I think that's basically everything we need here. So that's all for this video. In the next video, we're going to be looking at installing TipTab Editor, we're going to be creating article cards and the article page where we will have comments in there, and that will be basically the primary goal of the next video, is to have the TipTab Editor and the article page and the comment section set up. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.